intelligence security. And to understand the fallout of this leak, we spoke to DW's Michaela Kufner from Berlin. Michaela, first, what were the military officers discussing in that sensitive conversation?
Well, the officers caught in that recording were actually discussing the specifics of how the Taurus weapon system that Germany at this moment in time is still not delivering to Ukraine because the German Chancellor doesn't want to send it, how that weapon system could be used on very specific targets, specifically a bridge that connects Russia with Crimea. Crimea is a Ukrainian territory that was annexed by Russia in 2014. And the Kremlin has made it quite clear that if this target was hit, that would be seen as a major provocation. So Russia made this public deliberately and is now selling this tape to its own public as Germany planning an attack on Russia, which is misconstruing what these officers were actually debating. They were debating different ways that weapon could be used, how targeting could be controlled without the involvement of German military personnel, because they all understood that this is a red line for German politicians, particularly German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who wants to prevent any kind of action and any weapons delivery to be seen by Russia as an involvement of Germany, which of course is a NATO country, in this war in order to avoid a further escalation. And we now also learned that it was due to human error that this recording could occur. It was a participant sitting in Singapore with an open line. And the belief here in Germany is that this was pretty much a recording that was caught by accident by Russia, but is now being used in what the German defense minister calls a communication war.
Kremlin has accused Scholz of not being in control of the situation and also said that this recording shows direct involvement of the West in the Ukraine conflict. How has Germany reacted to all this?
Well, Germany is adamant that this is not the case and that indeed there are no plans for Germany to have any kind of involvement. We saw the German Chancellor react to a comment by the French president when he refused to rule out that in the future there could be troops on the ground by a NATO country. The German Chancellor actually recorded an address to the nation following that particular comment and saying, as long as I am Chancellor, there won't be any German troops in Ukraine. This clearly is being ignored by the Kremlin, and there are segments being used from this recording to basically misconstrue what was discussed as Germany actually planning an attack. As far as the Chancellor not being in control, well, there's a lot of domestic wrangling right now, both within his government coalition, but also between the opposition, which is still hoping to see early elections. They are already in campaigning mode, although that doesn't realistically look like it's on the cards. And we did see a comment come from the Conservative CDU opposition describing Olaf Scholz as a security risk himself. This is all very damaging to Germany's image to the outside, both towards Russia, but also to some degree towards its NATO partners, because this really comes within a context of the German Chancellor not having been confident or not having been quiet enough about the inner workings of NATO.
And how is this affecting Germany's relations with its allies?
The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz let it slip, to say the very least, that there most likely are French and British troops on the ground in Ukraine to control the targeting of some of their own weapon systems. And Germany, or the German Chancellor, used this as an argument why he's not sending the Taurus weapon, which is seen as the most precise weapon. He also later mentioned that it could be used to strike Moscow. So this is also a question of trust towards Ukraine using weapons only the either way, they are being discussed and not using them on Russian territory or to strike Russia really very much at the core. There is a risk essentially of World War III, which nobody really wants to debate openly. We know that Britain publicly really rebuffed the German Chancellor, disclosing that there are potentially British personnel on the ground. The French haven't been so public about this, but we know that there's also a degree of impatience on the French side. So there are really amends that need to be made within NATO, within the top leadership. But when you talk to the working level, they see this as the political workings that doesn't really affect how NATO itself operates. But what it does is it projects some kind of crack that isn't really necessarily there inside of NATO, but it gives Russia something to work with in its own propaganda. And that is what's being feared here most, particularly by Boris Pistorius, the defense minister, who's adamant that he won't sack any of the officers involved in that surveillance scandal because, as he put it, he won't play Russia's game. And that also counts for the political, let's call it, ripples that have been caused by the release of this recording here in Germany and further afield.
Michaela Kufner joining us from DW Berlin.